And welcome to The Skinny for Friday, October 24th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague, Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief of Creative Loafing newspaper. And we can bring that to... Hey, Ray, good morning.
Morning, Mitch. How's it going today, man?
It's great.
We got sweaters on, dude.
But it's, beautiful out there. This
It's
is Florida's
awesome.
finest, definitely. Good morning, everybody. October 24th. Yeah, as I mentioned in the earlier show, by the way, this is, the federal government shut down for 24 days now. And this is a huge day because this is the day regular employees, every federal employee is going to feel if they're not getting their check today. I talked to a federal employee on Tuesday, talking to her about the situation, and it's getting very real, folks. And we're going to, as we continue on with this impasse in Washington, D.C., it is definitely going to affect more and more people. So anyway, that's not the topic for discussion today. What we're going to talk about today is crime and punishment, okay? So, I was thinking about this, Ray. Basically, hopefully, you and I and our listeners, we're not caught up in the criminal justice system because it's going to, that's not a great place you want to be in. And to the extent that we talk about this, we talk about crime and politics and the like. But if you do get in the system and, it's a whole different ball game. And what happens in that system? And we're talking about, the Department of Corrections, basically, and the prison system and the like, because I find that unless you do have a loved one in the system, as it were, you don't really care, about it. And I understand why it's not on their radar with so many other things you got going on in the world and your own life. But in terms of the politics and in terms of public policy, it matters a lot because as Jeff Brandes, who's going to be on our show later today, former state senator, he always says, 80% of the people in prison right now are going to be coming out. And so it's important, how they're being treated in there so that they are functioning members of society. So we're going to get into this because tomorrow there's going to be a Tampa Bay Criminal Justice Summit taking place at Tampa Prep in Cass Street. It's taking place actually beginning today and also tomorrow. If you want more information about that, you can go to the website to horizoncommunities.org.
But we'll also link to the summit on our WMNF blog on the Skinny on WMNF.org.
And did something happen to me? I can't hear myself talking here.
I hear you loud and
Okay,
clear.
good. All right. So we're going to have, hopefully, we're going to have a current lawmaker and a former lawmaker. We mentioned Jeff Brandes, and also in the middle of the show, somebody who's worked in the correction system for decades to talk about this issue. And we want to begin right now with Tampa Bay Area Democratic House Representative from District 62, Michelle Rayner. Representative Rayner, are you with us? No, she's not with us right now, I'm told. Who do we have? We have nobody on there right now? Okay, all right, folks. Well, I'm going to
Michelle Rayner come on and Mitch will go there. And Don Scott's been running the Criminal Justice Summit for a long time.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting talking point because as you pointed out, Mitch, people just don't think about it. And then there's humanitarian concerns. Obviously, what is the point of prison? Is it truly to rehab people? And are we living up to that mission? And it's an interesting time to talk about incarceration in the state of Florida because we have this strange prison operating in the Everglades as well.
That's right. We don't, it's not much in the news, by the way, these days, right? It was so big in the summertime when it first came out, and the name and the lawsuits, and there are still lawsuits continuing. It was for a while there, we thought it was not going to be operating longer, and then they got a court ruling in the appeals court, so it is continuing to. Of course, we have, what's the other one? Deportation Depot, they're referring to it in North Florida. We do have those for detainees or detaining undocumented immigrants. That is still going on. But overall, in terms of the criminal justice system, one thing I will bring up, because we have, this has also been a topic, and I do want to talk to our lawmaker when we do get her on here about this, and that is this whole issue, of course, of returning citizens, felons who get the chance to vote. Because I find that even in Tallahassee, a lot of lawmakers aren't aware there was a change made recently, and I wrote about this. So as everybody knows, when it comes to Amendment 4 from 2018, which was going to allow felons the right to the restoration to vote if they completed their sentence. That's for everybody other than people who were committed murder or sexual offenses. And then the legislature had an implementing bill the next year where it was contingent upon you paying all fines, fees, and restitution, and that reduced the pool of people who were eligible to vote significantly. Okay, so that's since 2019. A couple of years ago, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the group that advocated for Amendment 4, they went to court against the state and saying, look, this is crazy, because you might remember back in 2022 when I think there was 20 people who were arrested for voting, right? They were illegally voting because in some cases they were felons, but they were told they got like voting cards in the mail that, it seems to them, hey, the state's sending me this, I'm okay to vote. And they weren't, and they got in trouble. And so there's been a little clamor amongst some of those voting advocates to like, hey, the state, you got to give us a system here because people don't know if they can vote or not, and that's not fair, right? And so the point I'm bringing up is, so there's a lawsuit that was filed. They came to a settlement last year, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and the state, and what came out of that is that now the state has to give information to any member of the public who requests it. But the problem is, in my opinion, is that they haven't told anybody about this. And so, in fact, what has happened is, okay, so thank you. We've got some information. We're going to get into that in a second. Okay, so we do have one of our guests on right now. We've got Patrick Mahoney. Patrick, are you here with us?
He's muted right now.
Hello, Patrick.
Yeah, I think we see Patrick in there, but he's just got himself on mute. So I think he's unmuting himself right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Patrick. So we'll tell our listeners who Patrick Mahoney is. He is, in fact, no longer, he's now a consultant regarding correction system. He was with the Florida Department of Corrections for more than 18 years and is involved in the criminal justice system for more than 30 years, starting as a probation officer in the 1990s and now a corrections consultant and re-entry expert. And he's going to be speaking tomorrow at the Criminal Justice Summit. Good morning, Patrick Mahoney. Great to talk to you.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite. Good to talk to you.
Yeah. Okay. So you were the director for the I think your last title there with the Department of Corrections. You were the director for the Office of Programs and Reentry, and in that role, you oversaw more than 1,100 staff and volunteers and managed a budget exceeding $100 million. Focusing on issues like education, workforce development, and substance use treatment for the incarcerated population. I guess I'll begin this way, Patrick. Let's talk about education, because I know that's something I follow in terms of programs that are available for inmates. So, again, they can be prepared when they enter the real world, as it were, and get out of the correction system. Talk to me about what you worked on there and how much are we doing in the correction system in Florida in respect to education?
Yeah, absolutely. So to put it all into context, the most of my administrative career, the Florida Department of Corrections was one of the largest prison systems in the nation. Currently, the third largest prison system in the nation, behind Texas and California, and that's regarding the inmate population. In comparison with those two systems, Florida ranked in the lowest in terms of resources for the population. Now, during my tenure as the director of programs and reentry for the last 6.5 years of my 30-year career with corrections, we saw a significant increase in resources for the population. So we were very fortunate to become up on par, at least with the population, in comparing us to other systems. So we have about currently about $100 million in resources for the population to provide academic education, career and technical education, or vocational instruction, substance use treatment, special education, and all the mechanics of reentry. So, yeah, Florida still needs work to get on par. And I don't know if you mentioned in your earlier segments regarding Secretary Dixon's testimony.
We're going to get to that. Yeah, we're going to get to the moment
last week. But we still need help and support. There's like he mentioned, the back end of the criminal justice system really needs that investment and support.
Yeah, absolutely, Patrick. We're going to really get into that. And I do believe that we're now joined by Rep. Michelle Rayner. Rep. Rayner, are you with us?
I am with you, and I apologize for my lateness. I am actually a criminal defense attorney, and I had to start in Hernando County and work my way down to Pinellas County, and I just left court, so I apologize, but I was working. I was actually working.
I know. It's all good. It's all good, Michelle. Thank you so much for
Thanks
joining
for being
us
here.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to talk to you, and again, we were talking with both Michelle Rayner and Patrick Mahoney, who was formerly with the Department of Corrections. We're talking about, again, the theme of this is criminal justice reform. There's a summit going on tomorrow in Tampa. So, Rep. Rayner, it's I don't think it's breaking news to say that Florida officials, Ron DeSantis on down, James Othmeyer, they talk about us being a law and order state, and that means that there really isn't a whole lot going on when it comes to criminal justice reforms. You are, as you mentioned, a criminal defense attorney. If you were governor, or if you could, or you're a Republican, you could pass legislation, which is a little easier to do than as a Democrat in the state. In terms of reforms of the criminal justice system in Florida, where would you begin?
Wow. Okay. So how long is this segment? I think one of the things I want to look at, I think that the ability for mandatory minimums, I think that mandatory minimums do not actually solve the things that prosecutors and some legislators believe. I think that that there should be discretion by the judge to be able to waive that. I think that mandatory minimums are not actually effective. I don't think that there's any statute or any statistics rather that show where mandatory minimum sentences are effective. I think that there's been a discussion, and I know my good friend and colleague, Representative Diane Hart, has been pushing for reevaluating the way that we look at game time, and also even ideal parole, because right now there's only, and I think, Patrick, you may be able to correct me, there's, I would say, a handful, maybe less than 100 people that are currently in the prison system right now, correctional system right now, that are even eligible for parole from when Florida did have parole. Those are two of the things that I think about. When we're looking at criminal justice reform, to me, it's about, if we really want people to be citizens that can be productive in this community and productive in our state, what are the tools that we are giving them in order for them to be able to do that? But also, I think that there's another piece to that. While I'm talking about the mandatory minimums, while I'm talking about game time and parole, what are we giving the correctional system to be able to do their jobs effectively? And not just tools, but also money, right? Many of you know that my uncle was the former and the first African-American secretary for the Department of Corrections under Lon Childs. So I have a lot of kind of intimate knowledge of the different things that he tried to do, and many of his predecessors tried to build on that work in order to make our correctional system one of the best, so that people do not come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And Patrick, and you mentioned Rep. Rayner about Rep. Hart's bills, and she's had a couple bills about the situation where we basically don't have parole in the state and haven't for a long time. But you're right, there is a small pool of people, a very small pool. Patrick Mahoney, do you know how large that pool of people who can be eligible for parole is in Florida?
I don't know the specific number, but in terms of the overall population, it is low. Parole was abolished many years ago, so there still are some individuals that are incarcerated that are eligible for parole, but the number is fairly low in comparison to the overall population. And really, just for context, on a personal level, Rep. Rayner, I was hired under your uncle, Harry Singletary,
Yes.
back in the 90s, and that's when Florida really had a top-notch correction system, and for a variety of reasons, and not just Florida, but nationally, corrections took a severe hit in resources, starting like in the late 90s, early 2000s to current. So just wanted to let you know, Rep. Rayner, that I was your uncle hired me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And as you know, he had such a passion for making sure that while folks are, incarcerated, that not only do the staff members have the ability to have the things that they need, but the people that are essentially entrusted to the correctional system are also treated with dignity. And I think that he had a belief that both weren't mutually exclusive.
That's correct. And the heartbeat of a correction system are the correctional officers. I believe Florida has a little more than 17,000 correctional officer positions. Many of them are vacant. Many of the ones that are filled, they're working extreme overtime hours. I believe the secretary testified last week or the week before that $150 million in overtime, which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
The department's a hiring machine, but they just can't retain them for a variety of reasons, mainly the pay. And then, the pay being low. And then once they get into the system, they start working and there's mandatory overtime. They just, the turnover is just incredibly high. And it's not a good way to operate a business.
Representative Rayner, you invoked the late Governor Lawton Chiles, and Creative Loafing's working on a separate story about the Fish and Wildlife Commission and how it wasn't always tilted to developers, and Lawton Chiles' name came up a lot. But with the governor's race about to be front and center, what role would you like the governor or even these candidates to play in talking about reform for criminal justice in a substantive way that isn't just lip service?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? I mean, right now it's always going to be lip service until you get in office and actually do the thing. But I would like to see, especially the Republicans who, right now the way the numbers are tilted in the state, more likely than not, the next governor of Florida will be a Republican. It is not my hope. My hope it would be a Democrat. But if we're looking at all things being equal, how do we say that this is the free state of Florida? How do we say that this is a law and order state? And then how do many of these same people invoke God and talk about grace and mercy, and yet are not able to give that same grace and mercy to folks that may have made a mistake? I'm a believer that we are not the sum of our worst mistakes. Obviously, if someone has done something wrong, if they've been convicted, if they have pled to it, they serve their time and they are done. But I think that we have to look at some of these laws, even when we think about, habitual felony offender or habitual felony offender, violent felony offender with special concern. Even if we look at, good and gain time, or we look at minimum mandatories, or even when we look at how we do score sheets, right? I mean, I think Creative Loafing actually even did a story on this, but a few years ago, where in Sarasota County, there was these two young boys, one was white, one was black, basically the same score sheet. One guy and charged with the same crime, and I think one guy PTI, and the other one, his offer was prison, right? And so, how are we actually what are we actually doing? So my position is, for me to even think that, a governor's candidate would even do anything about it, I would want the folks who otherwise would not talk about this and talk about criminal justice reform, talk about it in a real way. And once again, they have an example of that, Jeff Brandes. I mean, he's a Republican, he's a libertarian, but, he has led on criminal justice reform, because at the end of the day, what is happening is not working. You have people revolving back through the correctional facility doors. You have people who are being penalized. You have people that are going back to prison because they can't pay their probation fines. That's insane.
Right.
We got to do better.
Yeah, again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF. It's 11:25. Mitch Perry with Ray Rowe. We're speaking about the Department of Corrections here in Florida, the prison system. There is a criminal justice summit that's taking place tomorrow. The voice that you just heard there is Tampa Bay Area Democratic House Representative Michelle Rayner from District 62. And also we're talking with Patrick Mahoney. Patrick Mahoney worked for decades in the Department of Corrections here in Florida. They'll both be speaking at this conference tomorrow. And it's interesting. Rep Rayner talked about Senator Brandes. He will actually be on our show just a little bit later here in the hour. Staying with you, Rep Rayner, I think that one of the panel discussions you're talking about tomorrow is one that really people who focus on who have inmates, who have loved ones in the facilities right now, and that is air conditioning or the lack thereof. Roughly 75% of the Florida prisons do not have air conditioning. The new ones do. The new ones that have been come online in the recent years, but the majority of them do not. This is a huge issue. We know a couple years ago, there was a consultant report that came out a couple years ago, and it basically said, memory serves, I think I have in my notes here, it was going to be over $500 million, right? A very high price tag to do this. And essentially, there is not much of an appetite from the legislature, from even the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, which is, I think, the most preeminent committee that hears these discussions here. And I guess, going to you, Patrick Mahoney, what are your thoughts about the fact that 3/4 of the facilities do not have air conditioning? How serious of an issue is that?
Well, I don't think you'll get any argument from administrators and staff from the Department of Corrections about air conditioning, particularly in the summertime where it's really, really hot. Again, you mentioned it, the price tag. Many of the facilities in Florida are extremely old. Just to retrofit them for air conditioning is hundreds of millions of dollars. But yeah, I mean, if you have air conditioning in prisons, the staff are happier, are willing to work a little bit longer in their overtime, and the population are a little bit more satisfied. You can go into some of these housing units in Florida in the summertime, and it's just tense. You feel that tenseness because it's hot. Who wants to live in an area, especially in our time, without air conditioning? So I don't think you'll get an argument from the Department of Corrections about air conditioning. It's really just the price tag and what the other priorities are, because there's so many priorities for the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, Rep. Rader, weigh in on that. I mean, I think it's what Patrick says is absolutely accurate. I think the Department of Corrections would like to do that if they could. They're not the ones who control the spending, of course. That is your colleagues at the legislature. Your thoughts there.
Listen, I sit on Justice Budget, and I know that this issue has come up several times. And before we even get to, the money, I think it's about humanity, right? It's about, treating people humanely. I understand that we have a carceral system here, and we can get into the philosophical idea about the carceral system, but yet we have a carceral system, and we have human beings who are in that system. So if we have human beings that are in that system, we need to treat them humanely. That's number one. Number two, $500 million in a budget that is, what is it?
117 billion. Yeah.
Be for real. Be for real. And I think the other part of that for me is that when I think about that is that when we are thinking about, retrofitting these prisons, we don't have to do it all at once. We can do little by little. We can do it, maybe we allocate X amount for these prisons on, for this year. And then, the next year we allocate X amount. But we have the ability to do it. And to me, it's not about the ability. It's the lack of political will. Because at the end of the day, it is about treating people humanely. It's about making sure that not only are the people who are housed in these facilities are treated humanely, but most certainly the correctional officers and staff are treated humanely. I mean, I don't like to go outside in the summer when it's hot. So I can't imagine being in a facility that, and I've walked through these facilities in the summer with no air. So to me, it's just about us actually having the will to do it. And I think viewing people, no matter who they are, no matter what the sum of what their mistake was or what crime they may have committed as human beings, and treating folks humanely. And we have the ability to do it. We just spent $450 million on Alligator Alcatraz. We have the money. There's money there.
Now, they say they're getting money back from the feds on that one, Rep. Rader.
They're not. They're not.
All right. We've got a couple of people who are going to make some comments here on the line here. So if our guests can wait here a second, we're going to hear from a caller here. This is Adam calling from Seminole. Adam, you're on WMNF.
Hi, thank you. No, I appreciate it, Representative Rainer. I was a teacher in DJJ. You're absolutely right. I taught as a substitute for several months in the DJJ system for the youth, and I'm a former youth development worker and teacher, and the conditions were deplorable. And I'm not painting a broad picture of our correction officers. I appreciate everything everybody does. But I was teaching, we had to teach in the mods one day, and it was because it was raining and they wouldn't transfer the students to the classrooms. They were horrible conditions, trash all over the place. And I looked at the officer and I said, you know, like, he was just standing there watching it too. And again, I'm not dogging him. I'm just saying. And I said to him, well, can we get this cleaned up? Or, I mean, you'd think we'd do better for these youth, right? And he said, well, if we make it nice, they won't want to come back, right? And to me, and she's right, it's humane. Like, we have to shift that culture. We should treat, those kids are already coming from rough backgrounds. That's why they're there. And so ultimately, it's really getting everybody to understand and have the will. Like, I am so in agreement with you to make those kinds of necessary changes and shift the way we think. We need to build relationships with those young men. And then, because a lot of them are in the system for good, and all they ever expect is that, you know, mistreatment. And there's too many people think that, well, if we keep it bad and we keep it mean and they won't want to come back. That's not it. Well, they need to understand that humans have the capacity for compassion, and we're there to help. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, guys.
By the way, I wanted to mention, Rep. Rayner, you did get a bill passed. I think, let's see, you chimed in with Bernie Jacques, your colleague from Pinellas County, on a bill that increases probationary periods for certain misdemeanor offenses involving controlled substances. So tell me a little more about that. Rep. Rayner?
I'm here. No, I'm here. So that bill actually was interesting because it was a bill that I didn't think that myself and Rep. Jacques would find same pagedness on, because, you know, I'm a criminal defense attorney and he's a former prosecutor.
Right.
But the bill essentially allows people who may have had encounters with law enforcement, they may have been convicted of reckless driving, but using controlled substances, being able to have the ability to have a probationary sentence, be able to do treatment that wasn't readily available to them as the law was before. And so I talked to a couple of my friends who are criminal defense practitioners. Shout out to Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, FACTL. We worked on that bill to make sure that it would actually broaden opportunities for folks who may have found themselves in that position.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5. It's 11:33. Mitch Perry with Ray Rowe. We're talking about the Florida Department of Corrections system here with Representative Michelle Rayner from the Tampa Bay area. Also, Patrick Mahoney, who was with the Department of Corrections for more than 18 years, and he's been involved in the criminal justice system for more than 30 years. Patrick Mahoney, you talked about this. Let's talk about what Ricky Dixon. Okay, Ricky Dixon is the Department of Corrections Secretary. He spoke before a Senate committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee on Criminal and Civil Justice this last week, and he talked about his funding needs for this upcoming session, of the coming year that he hopes the legislators can appropriate. He's asking for, he called this a staggering amount of money, $512 million for the next fiscal year to maintain the prison system, and that was not including for salaries, basically. And we know, and I know you know this, that obviously for any of us, it's important how much the salary, what you're making at your job, and this is a very tough job. And in fact, he mentioned the fact that there's officers as young as 19 with fewer than 2 weeks experience supervising more than 150 inmates in some correction facilities. He says that ratio compares to 1 in 35 or 1 in 50 in other states. We're talking about 1 in 150 with 19-year-olds here. What can you tell us about how it's like for a corrections officer and the problems with retaining them in our system right now?
Yeah, that's correct. So thanks to the Florida legislature and the governor a few years ago, they increased the starting pay for correctional officers from, I believe it was like $36,000 a year starting to $22 an hour, which equates to about $45,000 a year.
Right.
And then with their half-hour shift change as part of their hours, it came up to about $50,000. So a couple of years ago, they brought the pay up to a competitive rate, but then that's kind of leveled off now over the last several years, and now we're back, to a rate that's much lower than testified that Alabama, which borders the Panhandle, where we have, I believe, 17, 18 prisons in the Panhandle, where we may be competing with Alabama, that's paying almost $70,000 a year starting for correctional officers. So we're going to have that debate again on getting our correctional officer pay increased so we can recruit and retain at an appropriate level to operate, these multi-million-dollar facilities in the future. So, like I said, the correctional officers are the heartbeat of our correction system, and without them, we can't do everything else we want to do to maintain security and to affect a successful reentry and to impact recidivism in the state as well.
Patrick, while you're talking, to riff a little bit off of what Representative Rayner was talking about, a visit to a prison can change somebody's life, especially electeds that go or visit frequently. They often talk about the visit. And when we talk about the criminal justice system and alleged criminals, there's just like this anecdotal humanity involved. How do you talk to people just every day on the streets who may not understand? And how do you describe the humanity of the people who are, prisoners in the penal system?
Yeah, you're right. I've talked to and toured facilities with community members that have never stepped foot into a prison. Mm-hmm. And when they do step foot into a prison and walk around and have the opportunity to interact with the inmate population, they do change their mind. It's almost going into an out-of-body experience that, they have this perception, this TV perception of prison, but once they get into a prison and tour it changes their mind, and many of them start wanting information on how to volunteer because they want to make an impact. I do want to comment on the callers about, I think he mentioned it was DJJ and they left trash in the housing units on purpose, so as a deterrent. That does that the Florida Department of Corrections prides itself in operating prisons securely and appropriately, and part of that operation is maintaining a clean compound, which includes the housing unit. So housing units are in Florida prisons are very, very clean. We make sure the population is part of that operational aspect of a clean home. So
appreciate that clarification. And we'll go back to Rep. Rayner for a second, and Rep. Rayner, we'll let you go in a moment here. Actually, I wanted to talk a couple of off-topic, if I could, with you, at least on this issue, but while we still have you, I know that you're on the Select Committee on Property Taxes, right? That House Speaker Danny Perez puts you on that committee. You're obviously looking at this whole issue of property tax reform. And last week, your Republican colleagues, released, I think it was 8 different proposals, 7 would-be constitutional amendments on this. The governor flat out rejected this 2 days ago. It says they're not serious about it, et cetera. Although he hasn't come up with any of his own plans as of yet. Do you have concerns about what's going to ultimately end up on the ballot? Of course, people are going to vote for this, but that's always, Governor Ron DeSantis and Chief Financial Officer Blaise Ngoli are talking about every day is how they're going to provide huge property relief for Floridians, and we don't really know how that's going to shape out.
Yeah. So, there are times that I feel like we have very unserious propositions in the state legislature. I understand that people want financial relief. I think that the idea of doing away with property taxes is a red herring because no one has provided to me. And if y'all have any other suggestions, or maybe I've overlooked something, no one has provided and said to me, Rep. Rayner, this is how we plan to subsidize housing or schools or fire or police or any of the things that property taxes go for. The cities of Tampa and St. Pete, which I both represent, the property taxes that come to them don't even cover fire and police. And then if we want to take a step back, we in the legislature, I believe in my first term, we've had a bill where, you quote unquote cannot defund the police. So then that means cities are going to have to shift money from, whether it's fire or parks or whatever, to make sure that the police funding can be covered. Like I don't know if there is a real world where doing away with property taxes makes sense. The issue that I keep hearing about, the issue when I walk around in my neighborhoods and in my district is not property taxes. It is property insurance. I will keep saying that until the cows come home. We have seen the reforms that the Republican-led legislature has enacted has not given people relief. We were told, it's going to happen in 18 months. 18 months have come and gone. So to me, I think that these are very unserious proposals. I think that this is a red herring. I think the governor has a lot of other stuff going on with Hope Florida and all the other stuff he has going on. And he's trying to divert attention from actually still dealing with the real problem that he actually helped create.
And lastly for you, I know, as we've mentioned, you were a criminal defense attorney. And I know recently you established ties with two of your colleagues in the legislature, Rep. Ashley Gant from Miami and LaVon Bracey Davis from Orlando, to establish a new law firm. And according to my Facebook feed this morning, you're now defending Elvis Piggott, who is facing serious charges following his brandishing of a gun at a political event in Tampa 2 weeks ago. Can you confirm that?
Yes. So my law firm, Bracey Davis, Gant, and Rayner, he has retained our law firm to represent him. I love to remind people that before I am a legislator, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm a businesswoman. And just like any other person, he decided to retain our law firm. And so our law firm is the firm that is his counsel of record.
All right, great. We'll leave it there with you. Representative Michelle Rayner, District 62 in the Tampa Bay area. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the summit.
All right. Look forward to seeing you too, Mitch. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All right, and now we're going to go back. I think we have State Senator Jeff Brandes, former State Senator Jeff Brandes with us. Senator, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Okay, fantastic here. Patrick Mahoney, I know I told you I'd keep you to 11:40. Patrick, can you hang with us a few more minutes, or do you have to go?
Sure. No, I can hang for a few more minutes.
Okay, great. Actually, and I want to go to another caller, and then we'll get to Senator Brandes in a second here. This is Pat, who wants to talk about air conditioning in prisons. Pat, you're on WMNF.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of issues relevant to no air conditioning in jail. I think that other problems... Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think other problems can be triggered by not having air conditioning, like behavioral issues. If you're really, really hot, I would think inmates, not just the guards, but inmates would be really acting out and doing things they would not normally do under such circumstances. But I have to say another thing is no air conditioning can cause other health problems, and there's got to be a financial cost to the health problems, and not just financial, but in deaths, because I live here in Pinellas County, and I just Googled the name of this lady, Dorothy Palanchik. She stole the Publix Philly cheesesteak sandwich in 2008, and for stealing a sandwich, being in jail under bad conditions, she caught MRSA, and she was dead within a couple of weeks. So I'm saying there's got to be other costs that you have to consider, not just, they're inmates, they can take it because they're doing their time, blah, blah. But there's other considerations that are going to cost us money on the other side in behavioral stuff and in health issues.
Well, thank you, Pat. And that brings up an issue, Patrick Mahoney, and that is about health care, right? I know healthcare, as we're all talking about the news with the government shutdown, obviously healthcare prices are going up for all of us, and that includes the Department of Corrections. That has to be a huge issue because there's obviously, in some cases, substance abuse going on in those prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think healthcare is probably one of our top, if not top 2 or 3 budget entities within the Florida Department of Corrections. And again, like you mentioned, it increases year to year to year. Part of Secretary Dixon's request was an increase in the drug costs for medications for the population. That increases from year to year. So, going back to the air conditioning issue again, I don't think you'll get an argument from corrections staff on air conditioning. There is that aspect of a calmer staff and a calmer population to operate a facility, a multi-million-dollar facility with air conditioning.
State Senator Jeff Brandes, let's get you in on this. You have talked a lot about all over the situation with our Department of Corrections being a broken system right now. I mentioned earlier, Ricky Dixon came before a committee last week in the legislature, said he needs $512 million to maintain the current operations right now, and that was not even mentioning salaries right now. How would you describe where we're at or the state of situation, conditions with our Department of Corrections right now?
I mean, it's circling the drain. I mean, at the end of the day, what you have is a Department of Corrections that has failure points all over the place. Staffing is a major challenge for the Department of Corrections. Facilities is a major challenge for corrections. You've got these new Alligator, Alcatraz, and the new facilities. They're pulling corrections officers from other facilities to man these federally backed facilities. So at the end of the day, he's dealing, and you have a growing prison population. The oldest prison in Florida is over 100 years old. Most of them are 40, 50, 60 years old. And so the entire infrastructure is starting to crumble around them.
And going back to air conditioning for a moment, Jonathan Martin, he is a state senator out of Fort Myers area. He's the current chairman of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee. So he's an important guy in the legislature when it comes to issues like this. And on the issue of air conditioning, he points out Florida Statute 921002, the Criminal Punishment Code, which specifically states, quote, the primary purpose of sentencing is to punish the offender. Rehabilitation is a desired goal of the criminal justice system, but is subordinate to the goal of punishment. So he cites that when he says air conditioning is not a huge issue. He's went on to say that somebody not having air conditioning is a violation of your constitutional rights flies in the face of everybody over the age of 30 in the state of Florida who rode a school bus to school without air conditioning. What would you say to that, Senator Brandes?
Well, I think what we've seen is there's an evolving standard of the Constitution, right? If we had we don't use guillotines anymore either. But you know what? When they established the Constitution, guillotines were and hangman nooses were kind of the way of the means of execution. But we've kind of evolved beyond that. I think with the advent of new technology, we provide people access to that, right? We had medicines that were not available, but we provide those medicines because things evolve and standards change. So I think, we can't, there's an easy way to break down that argument, which is his argument was, well, these things didn't exist when the Constitution existed, so how could they be cruel and unusual? Well, neither did dialysis or cancer treatment. Right. So at the end of the day, we've got to be able to move beyond that. The simple truth is the department is going to have no choice here shortly because they're not going to be able to hire people. I mean, who wants to work in a place where you're going to work 12-hour shifts, you can't bring a cell phone in, and you're hot and miserable? This is why they have a 60, 70% turnover rate. This is why you can go to basically any prison in Florida and find wardens who have been on the job for less than 5 years. So you have essentially no choice at some juncture, and the legislature will have to wake up to this fact. And frankly, I think this is one of the areas where the governor's failed the most. Is he still, after 7 years in office, has failed to tour a
right. He never talks about. He never mentions this. This is never on his agenda.
It's his largest agency, and it's his least focus.
Patrick Mahoney, from former Department of Corrections, former employee of the Department of Corrections, I should say. What if you had a legislative proposal other than money? Because I think we all agree that is something that is essential to help out the system here. Is there any legislative proposal that you think would help out? Maybe in terms of reducing the population? I think we're at 89,000 prisoners right now in our correction system here in Florida.
That's a good question. I mean, Florida touts itself as a law and order state, so we want to arrest and prosecute individuals, and those that deserve to go to prison should go to prison. But again, we need to support the back end of the criminal justice system, which is the corrections, the prison system. And to do that, instead of them just sitting around all day or working in the yard, give them constructive activities to do, which would include programming, academic programming, substance use treatment. 60% of the population has a substance use treatment need. So, quick math, six out of every 10 inmates you walk by on a prison compound has a treatment need. They need to be in substance use treatment. We don't have the resources or funding to impact that. and that's a real need, because that impacts recidivism, impacts reentry. Our local reentry communities, many of them want to do the right thing, but again, it's dotting those I's and crossing those T's to impact the connectivity of those being released from prison.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:50 here. You're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF. I'm Mitch Perry with Ray Rowe. We're talking to Patrick Mahoney, who's formerly is a consultant now on prisons. He worked in the Department of Corrections here in Florida for 18 years. And also speaking with former state senator Jeff Brandes. Senator Brandes, of course, is now with the Florida Policy Project, got that right, where he heads a think tank, and this is one of the main issues that that think tank discusses here. And by the way, let's go to a call again. We've got Chris in Clearwater. Chris, you've got a moment here. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Right. I think that the diet needs to be improved because there's so many studies showing that nutrition, if you do a web search for the studies of nutrition and toxicity with the term criminality, you'll find that ideations of suicide and homicide are increased by poor nutrition and increased toxicity. Now, naturally, nutritional deficiencies lower the ability to detoxify, cleanse, and purify from toxins. For instance, mold and their excretions, they're called mycotoxins. They're inevitable in peanuts. Been shown in studies to cause thoughts of suicidality and homicidality. And environmental working group says that fluoride, chloramine, and chlorine can cause increased leaching of lead from the old pipes and fittings. Dartmouth College studies from Roger D. Masters, Byron Copeland, and others show that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the nutrition. I just don't want to go into the whole thing about the other system about the water there. But Senator Brandes, do you have a thought about that? I know I talked to the folks, Florida Cares, which is a advocacy group for inmates. One of the issues that they real have, and I know it's not just unique to Florida, but the outrageous prices at these canteens for inmates, right? Something that you can get at a 7-Eleven over here for a couple of dollars is like 3 times that price in the prison system, and it's obviously they have a captive audience there.
Well, listen, they have problems all over the prison system. The canteen pricing is something that they've consistently worked to get right because it's all out of proportion. Telephone pricing for phone calls is out of proportion. People are spending thousands of dollars talking to their loved ones, but we know that family connections reduce recidivism. So we want people to actually talk to their loved ones on the outside. But the larger problem that I see, Mitch, is this. The legislature this year, the entire year, will probably spend between 4 and 6 hours in total talking about the Department of Corrections and the prison system as a whole. That is not enough time. That is not enough time to do a full review, to look at the entire prison system, to plan to moving forward. What you need to establish is a commission. You need a commission of independent individuals, people that are corrections involved, people that are legislators, people that are focused on this problem, that is going to come up with a long-term plan for the state of Florida. That is citing new facilities. Listen, I think we should try. We should provide drug treatment. The problem is most of these facilities are located in such rural areas. You can't find people to provide the treatment options because they just don't exist in those regions. So at the end of the day, we need to be looking at modernizing our prison system, and we need to look at where we're siting our prison system. A vast majority of the prisons in Florida are all in North Florida. The vast majority of the population lives in South Florida. We have to come up with a long-term plan for the state, and it's going to take billions of dollars because we've underinvested in the prison system for decades. This is not a new problem. This is just we've been a football team of punters. And that's the challenge is the legislature, the governor, nobody wants to talk about this growing and frankly huge problem that the state faces with its Department of Corrections. And listen, I think you've got the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, the former Secretary of the Department of Corrections, all out there saying the same thing for years, which is we're dying here. We are you've starved this thing down to nothing. We can't retain staff. Our buildings are falling apart. We can't provide programs and services. Our reentry is $50 in a bus pass, and that hasn't changed for decades. All of these things is what you look at a failed system. There's a reason that the Department of Corrections Secretary, Mark Inch, the previous one, gave every one of his wardens a book called The Devil's Butcher Shop, which talks about a prison riot and walks people through how that unfolded. this is the thing that is terrifying to the department, to the governor's office, everything else, is at some juncture, people fight back. And that's the last thing that we want. But this is kind of the trajectory we're headed on. And that's unfortunately either that or the federal government comes in or the courts come in and take over your prison system.
Patrick Mahoney, Senator Brandes talked about a commission. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, no, there's actual validity to that. I believe that would probably be a good idea. Like the Senator said, once a year for 60 days, they talk about the prison system, along with hundreds of other topics that there are priorities throughout the state. And after 60 days, they go home and they don't talk about it again until they come back the following year. So there is the aspect of having to discuss this floundering problem that the state has continuously, year in, year out, day out, to fix this issue. Yes, so I would have no problem having some kind of commission that continuously talks about how to improve the prison system.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm sorry, Senator, you want to go?
Yeah, what we ultimately want here is better outcomes. What we ultimately want is best practices. Right? The state of Florida should follow best practices in the prison system. The state of Florida should be constantly looking to increase better and get better outcomes. This is the challenge. The legislature would just rather ignore the problem than actually stand up, face it, recognize that the solutions exist. Some of them are going to cost money. That is unavoidable.
Right.
It is a key function of government.
We've got just a couple of minutes left to go. I want to get one more caller in here. Let's see. Layla from Brandon. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you, Mitch Perry and Mr. Brandes. I've talked to you several times on the air, and I'm on board. I was on the reentry board for 5 years in Coastal County. I feed the homeless. I tried to introduce a reentry program for 40 felons coming out of prison back in 2012 with Sammy's Bakery of Brandon, and we almost got there, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But I did get to tour the Lake City prison as a person to go through the reentry for a person coming out of prison and all the roadblocks they have to go through. I think we should think visionary, and I think we should let the prisons plant the trees that we need for the state of Florida. I think every county needs to plant 250,000 trees. The prison system would be a great place to do that. It would get the inmates part of the solution, and at the same time provide shade for the upcoming heat index for next year. It might take 5 years to get the trees high enough and have them grow big enough to where we're getting the shade that we need. But our state needs more trees. We lost a third of our trees last year with the storms.
Thank you, Layla. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Jeff, were you trying to get in?
No, I think one of the things you recognize when you walk a prison yard is there are no trees, and that's generally because twigs can be used as weapons and branches can be used as weapons. So there's no trees on the yards. This is one of the major issues, is because there's no shade on the yards, and so the yards are not often utilized because there's no place to escape the heat.
Yeah, Patrick Mahoney.
That's true.
Yeah, Patrick, I also want to say the way
to the AC issues too.
Sure, I'm sorry. Is that about work programs? Right, there are work programs. I know there, but is there enough of that going on in our correction system with inmates? I mean, I know they don't get paid basically, right? But in terms of like them being able to be efficient and do other things for our society, as it were.
Right. Each individual incarcerated in prison has what they call a work assignment or job assignment. So they do work. They maintain the grounds, the inside grounds, the outside grounds, the housing units. They work in the kitchen, preparing the food. They work in the laundry. And there's also initiatives with our career and technical education programs where we engage and invite employers to come in and observe the individuals in their vocational trade, and also do interviews for those that are getting ready to be released. And that process is expanding throughout the state. So that Senator Brandes mentioned best practices. That's a best practice, because I've traveled to other states and other corrections facilities that Florida does have some really good best practices, but we have to invest in those best practices to expand throughout the rest of the state to impact the rest of the population.
Okay,
Patrick Mahoney, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Retired from Florida's Department of Corrections after decades of service. Former State Senator Jeff Brandes also on the horn with us today. Michelle Rayner dropped off a little bit earlier. Thank you for joining us. They're talking about the Tampa Bay Criminal Justice Summit, which runs today and tomorrow at Tampa Prep. There's more information on that on our blog, WMNF.org. My name is Ray Roa. You're listening to WMNF Tampa today. On behalf of my co-host, Florida Phoenix senior reporter Mitch Perry, Anthony Maduro on the phones today, Joe Remo on the board. We want to thank you so much for continuing to support this nearly 5-decade-old community radio station. I think I see Joellen Schilke or somebody in Studio One ready to do art in your ear for you. Thank you so much for listening to WMNF Tampa. We'll see you next week.